If you research and look up the traits and characteristics of psychopathy, you'll find that you can easily match all of those traits with the traits and characteristics of the United States, the way it behaves globally, and even the way it behaves domestically against their own people. You'll find that it very closely aligns with the definitions and the characteristics and the traits and the attributes of a psychopath. And one of the key traits of a psychopath is that they feel no guilt, they have no conscience, they feel no remorse. They feel completely entitled to take advantage, to prey upon, to behave in a predatory manner towards anyone who's weaker than them, who's more gullible than them, who's more naive than them, who's more trusting than them, who's more sincere than them, who's kinder, who's gentler, who's more compassionate. They feel completely entitled to take advantage of that type of person, use them and abuse them and exploit them, and they will feel nothing about it. They will feel no kind of way about it. No guilt, no remorse, no sense of shame. Now let me explain by way of example. On September 11th, 2001, 19 individuals committed a heinous terrorist attack on the United States. Since 9/11, Muslims around the world collectively have been held responsible for that and have felt genuinely guilty about that, have felt horrified by what happened, and have apologized for it, have felt guilty about it, and have tried time and time and time again to atone for the actions of these 19 individual men. And we've done the same thing every time there's any sort of terrorist attack by any individual criminal or set of criminals. Even when those attacks are primarily directed against us, we are the #1 victims of terrorism by Muslim extremists. Not Westerners, not non-Muslims, not Americans, not Europeans. Muslims have died in far greater numbers, but we have gone out of our way to try to atone for the actions of those people, to disassociate ourselves from those actions, to apologize, to condemn. I mean, whenever there's a terrorist attack, Muslims around the world fall all over each other trying to get to a microphone to explain how much we condemn it, to explain how this is unrepresentative of Islam, how these people are not real Muslims, they're not true Muslims, they don't represent Islam. This is not what Islam believes in. This is not what Islam calls for. Islam does not advocate this, and Islam does not approve of this. Muslims fall over each other trying to get to microphones to explain that to the world. We do that to disassociate ourselves from the renegade actions of individual criminals who perform atrocities in the name of our religion. Now, contrast that with the endless list of crimes committed by the United States. And you can go back as far as you want, or as recently as you want. If you want to go as far as Nagasaki, Hiroshima, you can go there. If you want to go to slavery, you can go there. If you want to go to the genocide of the Native Americans, you can go there. And if you want to just talk more recently, you can talk about Iraq. You can talk about Afghanistan. You can talk about Syria. You can talk about Yemen. You can talk about drone attacks in Pakistan. You can talk about bombing the pharmaceutical factory in Sudan. It doesn't finish the atrocities committed by the United States. And that's just against us. Forget about talking about Latin America in the 1970s, 1980s, and now. Where's the remorse? Where's the apology? These aren't actions of renegade individuals. These are actions sanctioned by the government. These are actions performed by the government and sanctioned by the government and endlessly defended until now. Defended by the government and justified by the government, justified by the media, justified by pundits, justified by analysts, justified by think tanks. No one has apologized for any of these actions. They never apologize, and they don't feel any need to apologize. That's no conscience. There's no conscience there. There's no sense of guilt. There's no sense of humanity. There's no sense of responsibility and accountability, and no sense of grief for their actions. The closest they'll come is to say, yes, maybe Iraq was a mistake because there was no weapons of mass destruction after all. But the truth is, even if there were weapons of mass destruction, you didn't have a right to do what you did. Even if there were. Nations have a right to possess weapons of mass destruction. America possesses them. The UK possesses them. Everyone who was involved in the coalition against Iraq possesses weapons of mass destruction. So no, that's not why you were wrong. Just the fact that you didn't find weapons, that's not why you were wrong. Don't you feel bad about what you did? Why don't you have to explain to us that those actions don't represent your belief system? The same way that we have to explain to you when renegade criminals perform acts of terror, we have to explain to you that those actions do not represent our belief system. But you never have to explain to us, to assure us that violence and atrocities and war crimes, that's not what America stands for. That's not what the West stands for. That's not what democracy means. That's not what liberal values means. That's a misrepresentation. And you can't explain it that way because the representatives of liberal democracy, the representatives of the West, the representatives of America, they're the ones who are performing those actions. Those aren't the actions of renegade criminals. That's the actions of the government. And no one has apologized. And there's not even a feeling of the need to apologize. This is the difference between civilized people and savage people. This is the difference between a normal, healthy human being and a psychopath. That's the difference between the Muslim world and the West.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, Africans. I hope you're faring well where you are, and if you ain't faring well, please fare well where you are. Today we are going to start with a Persian proverb. You see, Persia, we don't have a country called Persia today, but we used to have it. It changed its name after colonization, right? So the old Persia, today it's called Iran, right? So Iran is the Persia that we knew back then. Doubt is the key to knowledge. You see, this means that when we begin to question, we start to see the truth. But truth is not simple. It is built from struggle, from conflict, and from clarity of morals. So in this video, we are going to have a commentary on Shahid Bolsen's video entitled "Honesty Starts with Moral Clarity." This statement in itself makes the case that honesty is not only about words, but about standing on clear moral grounds. Without moral clarity, honesty can be twisted and lies can be dressed up as truth. We have to pull apart his words, examine the mechanics of his logic, and then rebuild them in a reality of today, especially the reality of black Americans in the United States under Donald Trump, in what I do like calling, or what they call, Trumpism. This critical analysis we are going to have is going to ask a number of questions. First of all is, what is hidden behind the text? You see, Shahid Bolsen says honesty needs moral clarity. So what's the meaning of that? What is the meaning behind those texts, right? So we are going to have a contextual and the connotative meaning to the title, right? So we are also going to check on what plays, or rather, what power plays beneath the words that he used, and what contradictions are silently working in the background of his specific speech. So I want us to dive in the video, listen to Shahid Bolsen give his speech about why he thinks that honesty should start with moral clarity. Without further ado, let's dive in. I shall get back by the end of the video, of course, where we shall also have a deep critical analysis. Let's dive in.
Westerners are incapable of honesty. They're incapable of telling the truth. I've explained many times. I'm not saying it's deliberate. It's not necessarily on purpose, no. You know, that would be like, literally like saying someone who has no legs is on purpose not playing basketball. You understand? I'm talking about incapability, not deliberate, intentional dishonesty. I mean, obviously there are plenty of people who are just straight up liars out of the West and everywhere else, but I'm not talking about them. I'm saying that honesty is not their language in the West. Truth is not a dialect that they speak. They don't know how to speak that language. I know people get mad when I say that, but understand, I'm actually telling you something that has been done to you. I'm telling you something that you have been deprived of. You understand? I'm telling you something that you're a victim of by your culture, by your so-called civilization. They victimized you in this way. This is the most graphic and the most literal form of kufr, of kufar, covering up, concealing, burying the truth. And this is all they do. It's the only language they know. Truly, this is the only language they know. And this is why everyone around the world is quickly coming to the conclusion that you simply can't be engaged with. The Westerners simply can't be engaged with. It's just not productive. It's not productive. It's not useful in any way whatsoever to engage with you. Like I've said before, in these interactions, no communication ever actually takes place when we talk to you, when people in the global south talk to you, when Muslims talk to you. And that's a shame. It's a shame what has been done to you, but it has been done to you. It's a shame what you've been deprived of as a human being. This dysfunction that has infected, intergenerational dysfunction that has been inflicted on your culture. Now, of course, some of what I'm talking about could be dismissed as their ignorance or their misunderstanding, you know, or some sort of a personality disorder, like you can't pay attention, you have ADHD or what have you, or you're aggressive, you have a problem with your temper and so forth, and this is why you can't be engaged with it, why there can't be productive, normal, healthy, rational conversations with you. But for me, I characterize all of these behaviors under the overarching label of dishonesty, because that's how it pans out. That's the practical impact. That's the practical outcome. You know, you inject falsehood, you muddy the waters of discourse, you distract, you derail, you deny, you deflect, you sidestep. You know, you bring in irrelevancies into the conversation. You bring in fake issues. You do anything and everything. Wallahi, you do anything and everything to try to stop honest discussion. You always try to obscure reality by hook or by crook. And so the practical impact of all of that, that all comes out to the same practical impact as if you were just lying. I mean, it goes much deeper than just false narratives. It's deeper than propaganda. We're actually talking about a culturally ingrained reflex against truth. A culturally ingrained reflex against true and honest discourse. This is a civilizational pathology. And in fact, it comes down to foundational morality, you see, because you have that insistence on moral relativism, which is nothing but nihilism for beginners. It means ambiguity, moral ambiguity. They're morally agnostic, you understand? That's the heart of their dishonesty. Because honesty, truthfulness, it's not just about words. This isn't just about what you say or what you don't say. Dishonesty isn't just calculated lying or deception. You know, honesty is not actually fundamentally an intellectual, or it doesn't originate in the intellectual sphere, if you understand what I mean. Because before you choose to distort reality through deception, you know, before you string together words to speak a lie or to obscure the truth, you have in your heart already rejected reality and in fact the creator of reality and your inevitable meeting with that creator when you will be held account for whatever you say and what you don't say. You have imagined in your heart that you can actually weave an alternative reality. You can create your own fictional world, and that this fictional world is possible for you to somehow superimpose that upon the objective truth of the real world, and then you get to operate in your own version of the world according to your own rules, and you think that you can get away with it. You have internally convinced yourself that truth doesn't matter. So lies aren't lies. They're just equally valid alternative versions of reality. But existence is not a narrative. I said it's a civilizational reflex because it's both ingrained in the culture and because I think you can trace it back. You can trace how it grew out of the conditions, like I've talked about many times in Europe, in the West. You know, centuries of hard winters, thin soil, volatile harvests, recurrent scarcity. That trained whole societies to survive first and justify later. Dishonesty is a trademark of being completely dunya-centric, or what you can call materialistic, meaning that you are inordinately concerned with material things, with material survival, with accumulating resources, and so on. Very Western. When material well-being feels threatened, then truth just becomes negotiable. You start to make up the rules as you go, you know, to get what you want and not feel that you've done anything wrong. You want to be able to get what you want and not feel that you did anything wrong in doing so. Europe went for long stretches of history inside that sort of pressure cooker, environmental pressure cooker, low fertility soils in the north, repeated food crises and so forth. literally centuries of bad weather. This isn't folklore. This is the climatic and agrarian record of Europe, from the Little Ice Age and its, the agricultural shocks of that, to the grim sequence of famines from, 1315 and onwards, rotted crops, starving livestock, and so forth. They had a rough existence. I'm not kidding. And in my opinion, they resented that. Under those conditions, a pattern set in mentally, spiritually. First, normalize getting by through extraction. If the crops fail, then you raid the next village. You pivot to raiding, pivot to external predation. This wasn't born out of adventurism. Scholars of European history describe all of the pressures that they were under, the resource limits, demographic problems, political opportunities. That catalyzed the Viking turn to organized acquisition abroad. That's what made them do that. The method was violence, but the ethic was necessity, their version of necessity. The narrative was glory. See, that template, the template of basically externalizing the solutions to internal scarcity, this became a very durable habit, and it became your culture. You even did there was even a domestic version of extraction. Enclosure, enclosing the commons. They were fenced off. Customary rights were dissolved, and it was all done according to the language or the rhetoric of improvement. They laundered the dispossession of the people with the rhetoric of productivity and efficiency. It was a new moral grammar in which legality could sanctify harm, and policy language, or the language of policy, could bury the truth. Case histories from England show how communal governance of the land was completely dismantled, and peasant rights were extinguished under these banners of productivity and efficiency and order, and so on. Once that moral software was written at home, well, they exported it. Mercantilism that framed the whole world as a finite treasure chest to be seized and to be hoarded. The point was not reciprocity, it was extraction. Extraction justified as national strength. This is the textbook doctrine of early modern Europe. Monopolize trade, bar rivals, drain the peripheries, and called all of that prosperity. And language did the heavy lifting on that, recoding seizure as commerce and subjugation as civilization. Oh, they've been lying for a long, long time. They've been lying for a long time. And they've been dishonest before they could even write it down. And they never got honest. This is what I'm telling you. If you move on to the modern era, well, obviously you have the emergence of what we know today as propaganda. During the First World War, America, they built a whole system. They built a whole government department for shaping public opinion. It was called the Committee on Public Information. And they pioneered methods of propaganda. They pioneered methods of indoctrination, really of brainwashing, that would later even be used by the Nazis. Okay, so this was sort of the, you can say, the official beginning in the U.S. of state corporate orchestration of public sentiment. Out of that milieu came someone like Edward Bernays and the concept of engineering consent. He understood that mass psychology could supersede public deliberation of individuals. And then you had someone like Walter Lippmann, who suggested that slogans could replace actual thinking processes. The technique matured, not only to sell products, but to sell versions of reality. If you don't know about Edward Bernays, you should look him up. He was quite ingenious. He was the epitome of an evil genius, diabolical. By the 1980s, you created what they called in academia the incredulity towards meta-narratives, which is just a sophisticated way of saying that there is no binding story. There's no final account. There's no objective truth. There's no overarching reality. There's only language games and power. But if truth is just a contest over the framing of narratives, then what's conscience? Conscience has lost any coherent meaning in that worldview. You have intellectualized a rationalization for just being the way that you've always been. It's just like shoot first and ask questions later, right? Act first, then after you've acted, weave your rationale afterwards. But what I'm saying is truth does exist. Reality exists. The real world exists. The action is what it is in reality. And no narrative is ever going to be able to change the nature of that action, nor the consequences of that action, because the truth is real. But the point is, you've been doing this for centuries. You've been doing it for millennia, and it has become a pathology. That pathology has become your culture until you no longer know how to interact. You don't know how to engage with the truth. You don't know how to be honest. Because again, as I say, Truth is not just about the words you say. It's a posture of your soul itself. Truth begins long before your tongue ever moves, before the mind ever starts assembling the words to say. Honesty is a covenant inside your heart. It's a willingness to face reality as it is, because you know that you will eventually face the one who made reality. And when that covenant is broken, the lies that you speak, that's just the leakage. That's why the problem isn't just propaganda. Propaganda is just a tool. It's an outgrowth of an already existing dishonest culture, of a culture that already does not value the truth or even recognize that there is such a thing. The deeper disease is a moral habit. It's a moral habit that trains a person to treat reality as optional. Moral relativism, you know. It sounds academic. Like I said, it's beginner level nihilism. Nothing matters. And that creates a sort of safe house of ambiguity where nothing is actually binding. No truth is strong enough to actually restrain your urges and instincts and appetites. No meaning is heavy enough to cause you to submit and discipline yourself. So in that fog, deception doesn't feel like deception anymore. It's just an alternative perspective. That's the confusion they create. And accountability, again, just becomes another word game, a point-scoring debate. You dodge and deflect and evade, you know. You throw counter punches, you throw curveballs, or what have you. Anything that you can do, if you can obscure the truth, if you can make the point of a discussion get lost in the quagmire of all your, you know, non sequiturs, your red herrings, your straw men, then you win. If you do that, you win. You actually believe in a form of engagement in which it is possible to win against the truth, against reality. You think if you can dazzle and you can distract and you can confuse until the truth gets sidelined, that means you win. And if you win, then that means that whatever you said to win is true. You're validated when your lie wins an argument, as if winning an argument makes what you said true, makes it not a lie. Do you understand? But that's how you think. That's how the West thinks. This is how estranged and alienated and disconnected you are from reality. How disconnected your culture has made you from reality. I mean, look at the sequence. Before anyone crafts a false argument, something inside them has already decided that the outcome matters more than the truth, meaning winning the argument by hook or by crook, that matters more than what's actually real and what's actually true. Reflect on that. Do you know how dangerous that is? Do you know how dangerous of a position that is to take? That's a theological position. You think that you're living in a reality where you will not be audited. You understand? This dismisses the day of judgment when speech and silence are both going to be evidence for you or against you. Listen, this is why I've talked about how we in this life, Muslims in this life, have to be witnesses, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us. We have to be witnesses in this world with integrity, because you're going to face the bare bones reality, the absolute truth on the day of judgment. Everything is going to be audited. Everything that you said, everything that you did, everything that you didn't say and didn't do. There are no alternative versions of reality on that day. No narratives. And there's no moral relativism on that day. You understand? So if you construct an internal fiction, a private universe, where cause and effect can be defied or distorted, where you can repaint facts, where you're the arbiter of the truth, then you're denying the day of judgment. You are denying the day of judgment. Look, you know the story of Cain and Abel, right? Christians have that story. And so do Muslims. Qabil and Habil. So Cain offered a lackluster sacrifice, an offering, and it was rejected. But he spun a narrative that his offering was only rejected because God was unfairly biased against him and unfairly preferential to Abel, to Habil. Well, that's the story of the West, because it was never about the material substance of Cain's offering. It was the deficiency of his intention, the deficiency of his sincerity. And he became envious of his brother, and he became angry at God, and he killed his brother in an act of envy and resentment. Well, that's literally the whole history of Western so-called civilization. Their history with the global South. That's the history of colonization. Envy and jealousy about the abundance of their resources in the global South, interpreted in the Western mind as an unfair preference by God, and then a centuries-long campaign of violence and extraction and acquisition and pillage and plunder out of resentment, out of jealousy, out of spite, and out of a total misunderstanding of the purpose of existence. Do you understand me? Because it's not like Europeans were the only ones on earth who were living in harsh conditions. It's not like they were the only ones who were precarious, whose survival was precarious, but they reacted to their conditions the way they did, and that's unique to them. It's peculiar to them. So you rejected the reality that you were living in on the basis of a wrong interpretation about it, because you felt that you were being unfairly deprived by God. And then you decided to act out. You decided to lash out and to prioritize material acquisition above and beyond anything and everything else, until morality and truth became afterthoughts. You see the chronology of this pathology in the Western mind? You formed this view that you can weave your own system of reality that makes anything and everything you do, anything and everything that you do to win. That is the definition of what is right and true and moral. But notice what this habit does to language. You know, words stop pointing to realities and they start serving your own appetites and urges and what you and your nefs. And any sort of precision in speech and any sort of fact checking is always treated as hostility or arrogance. Clarity is accused of being cruel. The aim of speech shifts from illumination to pacification and to justification. You can always tell when you're in that sort of a discourse environment, when every fact is greeted with deflection and evasion. You know, it's complicated. It's nuanced. There's many sides. I mean, of course, complexity exists, obviously, but complexity is not a permit to abandon the truth. Complexity should sharpen your honesty, not sabotage your honesty. I mean, what does this do to a person? Well, it splits you. You're forced to live in two different worlds at once. The real world that keeps intruding with consequences, and then the invented world of your own mind, of the Western mind, where the consequences are denied or pretended they either don't exist or pretended they're happening for other reasons. But your own nervous system knows the difference. Anxiety spikes because your soul is conscripted into a permanent cleanup operation, damage control operation. You have to seal up all the leaks in your alternative reality, patching up the holes in your fiction, explaining away the obvious. You're in a constant defensive posture. That's why so many people in the West are exhausted. It takes immense energy to keep the false world standing. You know, it can't bear the weight of the world, the real world. Your house of cards mentality, your house of cards worldview, your house of cards paradigm isn't strong enough to hold the weight of the real world, and it's being crushed. I mean, the cognitive dissonance alone, the cognitive dissonance is torture. People start crashing out. You see it all the time. And then, of course, you add to all this the fact that the West, and especially America, has deliberately, completely sabotaged people's thought processes, you know, their capacity for independent thought, for critical thought, and so on. Because, again, you need that. You need that as a so-called civilization. You need people to be that way. You need uniformity. You don't want any leaks in the system. It's already hard enough to keep the leaks from flooding, from reality flooding through the already existing cracks in your system. You don't want people to themselves become leaks. You understand? So you need uniformity. So then people become predictable because everyone is programmed. Like, for example, in any given video that I do, and probably in response to this video, you'll see it in the comment section. You'll see the recitation of all the same trite arguments, the attempted rebuttals. And I'm sure that the people who are writing these comments actually believe that they thought of these comments, but they didn't. These are programmed responses. Like, for example, if the West is so bad, why does everyone want to come here? Or, yes, the West has done bad things, but everyone else has done the same. Well, you're using a computer, aren't you? You're using Western technology. Aren't you being a hypocrite? Or, my favorite, why are you wearing a suit and tie if you don't like the West? And of course, you got just the blanket dismissal. Oh, you just hate the West. You see what I mean? Truth doesn't matter. This is not honest engagement. The substance of the arguments that are made in the posts or in the videos that they're responding to are never acknowledged, never processed. There's just this reflexive deflection, diversion, misdirection, and so on. Any of these attempted program rebuttals can obviously easily be answered. They can easily be answered. But that would mean diverting off the path of the original point in the video and creating just busy work as a tactic of distraction. That's all this is. Cover up an actual issue, cover up an actual argument, cover up an actual point with a pile of non-issues, a pile of misdirections. And this whole process obscures and it covers up and it distracts and it enforces moral relativism or a reality relativism. I mean, like conflating, for example, an actively ongoing Western genocide in Gaza with the alleged crime of hypocritically using a computer. It's absolute nonsense. What are you saying? You don't even know what you're saying. And another version of this is something that happened the other day on the Middle Nation Telegram discussion group. Okay, we had someone who decided to rant his outrage about the Israelis, how evil the Israelis are, how anyone even trying to deal with them within the framework of legality, well, they're just a fool. They're a coward. You know, he talked about how the Israelis are just wicked and how they steal children's organs and how all they want to do is to destroy Islam and so on and so forth. Okay. And he was basically inferring that the only proper way of dealing with them is what? Violent annihilation, I suppose. He didn't really have a point except to delegitimize the strategies that are being employed by necessity by the Arab states and by the Muslim world. This was all being said in response to the Israeli strike in Doha. Okay. This was an emotional outburst. Well, we don't do emotional outbursts in our discussion because that's self-indulgent. It's time wasting. You are literally putting yourself and your feelings at the center of everything, and I can't stand that. Stating the obvious, okay, is not analysis. Shock and outrage are not strategies. And performing your despair and your anger more loudly than anyone else does not make you more virtuous. And it does not mean that you feel it more than the rest of us. And it doesn't make you right in your conclusions. And so when this person got pushback, as inevitably he did, he immediately reverted to, well, that was hurtful. You're not being nice. You see the manipulation? They can't engage honestly. And of course, this person is American. Obviously, it goes without saying. Everyone in the discussion already knew that this was an American before he was identified as such, because he self-identified as such by his manner of discussion. I'm loud and I'm passionate and I'm histrionic in my outrage. And therefore, I'm wise. Therefore, I'm right. Therefore, my views should be respected. Because in the West, performance is everything. It trumps truth and reality. Performance is everything. No, this is dishonest. This is dishonest. It's a dishonest approach to discourse. I've said it many, many times. If you form and voice and argue your opinion, while it is not a knowledge-based opinion, it's not based on facts, and it's not based on any sound thinking, then you are identical to a liar, in my opinion. You are someone for whom the truth does not matter. So you won't even benefit by being told the truth. Because if you did care about the truth at all, you would have already researched facts. You would have already researched information before forming your opinion, much less before voicing it, and much less before arguing your opinion in public with other people. No, you don't care about the truth. You care about validation and you care about recognition. You care about being regarded as moral more than you care about being moral. And this is the essence of so-called Western civilization. Okay? Say what you mean and mean what you say. We all know that. We all understand that idea. But meaning what you say is not about feeling passionately about what you're saying. That's not what that means. No. Meaning what you say is about the soundness of what you are saying and that you are convinced of that. That you're saying what is true because you know it is true based on sound reasoning, not based on passion and emotion. Like I said, this is something that has been done to you. You have been deprived of honesty. And wallahi, it's a catastrophe. But this is something that has to be understood both by the Muslim world, by the people in the global south and so on, but also by Westerners themselves. Obviously, for us, for Muslims and for people in the global south, we have to know that we cannot deal with you the way that we would deal with honest people. But for Westerners, you have to know this so that maybe you can actually become honest people. Again, I've explained it many times before, but I'm not just talking about lying. Understand me, I'm not just talking about lying. Because plenty of you don't deliberately lie, but you're still dishonest. You still cannot communicate with others in an honest manner. You can't stay on topic. You can't engage with the points being made. You can't restrain your impulse to deflect and to subject change or to throw in false equivalencies or to divert or evade or start ad hominem attacks or be contrarian for purely defensive tactical reasons. You can't stop yourself from cherry picking or relativizing or. You have a tremendous amount of rehabilitation that you have to do before you can even start being honest, I'm telling you. Because look, again, Honesty is also about saying what you yourself think, what you yourself thought of, ideas and perspectives that you independently built in your own mind, you know, and using expressions that are unique to you, unique to your own mind. And your society has almost completely destroyed your ability to do that. I mean, it's unwise for me to do this, for me to point this out. And I don't mean to offend anyone in my comment section. I don't mean to offend anyone who supports Middle Nation and who appreciates our content, but let's be honest. You can look at even the positive comments in my comment section and you'll see what I'm talking about. Where's the lie? Protect this man. Let him cook. Truth bombs. No lies told. You talk in memes. You talk in received slogans from a menu of quips. I mean, I appreciate the support, don't get me wrong, but you do understand what I'm saying, right? You understand what I'm saying. Use your own words, use your own thoughts, but they have bankrupted your ability to express yourself. They depleted your lexicon. All of this is poisonous to real honesty. And of course, for the Muslim world and for the global South, generally, we have to know this. We have to know this about the West and about Westerners, because it also means that the West cannot offer us any ideas, any systems, any theories that are going to be genuinely useful for us. Because you never believed in any of them yourselves in the first place. You just come up with these things as packaging. You understand me? Your theories, your ideologies, your systems are all dishonest, false, fake, and hypocritical. You just want to do what you want to do. And then you wrap all of that in a package to make it look better, to make it look pretty. Because what you want to do is ugly. That's why I say it doesn't matter. Capitalism or communism, right or left. Okay? Socialism, Marxism, what have you. I don't care. Understand, they are all driven by an irresistible, overwhelming driver, which is to cover up truth and fortify falsehood. You know, you think that the leftists are the ones who care about the poor and who care about workers because they talk about, for example, income inequality, wealth disparity, and so on, wealth redistribution. No. Look, I'll admit that you all had me fooled about that myself for a long time when I was younger. You fooled me about that. But the fact of the matter is, both of these Western economic theories are just bookends holding up a whole monetary and economic system that we don't have to accept in the first place. You know, by giving us these divergent views of the same system, they fool you into thinking that that system is the only one there is. And it's just a question of how we're going to tweak it, how we're going to implement it. Listen, before colonization, maybe 70% of the people on this earth did not operate in a money-based economy. They weren't poor until your money system made them poor. You know, you can talk about places where people only earn $2 a day, and it's a shame and it's a pity and so forth, and, you know, it's capitalism's fault and communism can fix it. You say that they're in poverty, but you have no idea how much of their sustenance, how much of their provision, how much of their daily needs are met outside the framework of money. But you decided that money is the exclusive measurement of wealth and well-being. It's the exclusive way for anyone to have access to goods and services. So then the only discussion can ever be within this framework. Well, that's dishonest. There are other ways to run an economy. There are other ways to run a society. There are other ways to govern and so on. There's indigenous ways. There are ways that most of humanity used throughout most of human history, right up until just yesterday, historically speaking. No, communism and capitalism is just like Coke and Pepsi, as far as I'm concerned. Meanwhile, we grow our own fruits and we can squeeze those fruits to make our own beverages. We don't need Coke and Pepsi because nothing that you're selling ultimately is any good for us. I mean, it's just like Coke and Pepsi, honestly, because we've been able to actually watch you consume Coke and Pepsi for decades and we can see the outcome and it's not good. Neither one of those is good for you and certainly not going to be good for us. No, thank you. So, the dishonesty, the civilizational pathology of dishonesty in the West, as I say, originates from, in my opinion, a deep and resentful, spiteful take on reality. According to their worldview, they were less than. So they invented an alternative narrative about reality in which they could be superior. And this again is based on a foundational, fundamental dismissal of truth and reality And it grew into this pathology that makes them allergic to honesty. So they poison every discussion that they're in. They poison every interaction. They poison every communication. And then they build whole systems. They built whole systems, whole theories, whole ideologies, and a whole culture whose primary function is to prevent truth from ever being acknowledged, from ever being known, from ever being understood, and from ever being accepted. Okay, this was done to you. And because of that, you did all manner of atrocious things to us, just like Cain did to Abel. And because of that, like I say, the rest of the world is rapidly coming to the conclusion that you have nothing whatsoever to actually contribute.
So guys, after clearly listening to Shahid Bolsen give his speech, here is my deep critical analysis. To understand Shahid Bolsen's speech, we have to use a certain tool, a literary tool that we call, or rather that is called deconstruction, in order to arrive to an important meaning, a meaning that can be beneficial to the Black Americans, the Black community, and Africans as well. To understand his words is to pull apart the specific word choices that he uses, right? It is also to examine the mechanics of his logic, right? And then rebuild, after deconstructing, then we rebuild to see the reality of today. You see, a part is not greater than the whole, right? A shoe is not important when it can't be worn. A shoe is only important when it can be worn, right? So we can see clearly that we can see how moral clarity, honesty, and truth are shaped by power. And when we look at America today, we see how Trumpism has taken lies, dressed them as honesty, and sold them as the only truth. For Black Americans who already live under centuries of dishonesty in the form of slavery, segregation, police violence, and systemic racism, Shahid Bolsen's call for moral clarity is not abstract, rather urgent, right? So what does Shahid Bolsen mean by saying moral clarity, right? Shahid Bolsen says honesty starts with moral clarity. That means before speaking truth, one must know what is right and what is wrong. But here lies the difficulty. Who decides what is right? In politics, each side claims honesty. In America, we have the Democrats and the Republicans. In religion, groups disagree on moral clarity. And in the society, the rich and powerful shape what honesty means. So this brings an ambiguous nature to our understanding of nature, of honesty as we know it, right? And so, Shahid Bolsen points to the fact that without moral clarity, honesty is weak. A man can seek honesty but stand on immoral grounds, right? He gives an example. A soldier who kills in war may honestly say he killed, but without clarity on whether the war is just, his honesty is hollow. Now, if we apply this to the state of America, we see the contradiction. America claims honesty in its history books, but hides the moral crimes of slavery, the theft of native land, and the exploitation of black labor. White America says, we built this nation honestly, but without moral clarity, that honesty is only a propaganda. Yeah? So to see how Shahid Bolsen puts his words and how impactful they are, let's not just take his words lightly, right? Let's have them with a deeper understanding. You see? What is the surface meaning of his words? Honesty must be guided by moral clarity. That's true. What's hidden? The hidden thing is that honesty itself can be corrupted when morality is blurred, right? And the contradiction also exists in this. The society often praises itself, or rather the society can often praise honesty without asking whose morals it serves, right? The society can congratulate honesty without knowing the morality that honesty serves, right? Remember, you can't be honest in immoral deeds, right? You can be honest in immoral deeds. A soldier can kill and he can confess, I killed. But what is the moral grounds? Shahid Bolson tells us we need to understand that honesty should go hand in hand with moral clarity. For you to be honest, you must first understand what is morally right and what is morally wrong, right? So this brings about the objection. No, not the objection, but the objectiveness of truth. The truth can never be subjective. I can't say 1 + 1 is 2 here where I'm sitting, and when I go to somewhere else, 1 + 1 equal to 12. It can't be that, right? So in America, there's a contradiction that is being used, and the contradiction is being used by Trump's policies. Trump's policies, I will name them Trumpism in this video. Trump says he is honest because he says it like this. His supporters call this moral clarity, but his version of honesty is built on lies, fear, and racism. When Trump says make America great again, his honesty hides the immoral truth. That greatness meant black oppression, immigrant exclusion, and white dominance. Shahid Bolson words warns us. Honesty without true moral clarity becomes dangerous. For black Americans, Trumpism represents a dishonest honesty. It speaks bluntly, but stands on corrupt morals. Right? I'll come up again on this. Without true moral clarity, there is danger. For black American, Trumpism represents a dishonest honesty, right? A dishonest honesty. That which is being represented by Trumpism ain't truth. It speaks bluntly, but stands on corrupt morals, right? That's why we are having people who believed Trumpism to be right, and now they are crying. The farmers are always crying, right? The Latinos are crying. The Mexicans are crying. Some blacks who voted Trump are crying. The Koreans who were deported back to South Korea are crying. Why should someone cry because of honesty and moral clarity? It's because they're regretting. They're regretting they made wrong choices. Regret comes with a negative connotation. It comes with a negative precept. Another thing you need to understand is the black American experience and the dishonesty of America. For centuries, black Americans have lived under systems that called themselves honest but were morally bankrupt. Slavery, for instance. Slave owners said honestly, we own slaves, but moral clarity showed it was evil. Segregation was acted upon blacks. Other than slavery, we had segregation. Politicians honestly said, separate but equal. But moral clarity showed it was inequality, right? So they are trying to make what is dishonest become honest and to feed you with that. Another thing that the black Americans have experienced is policing. Officers honestly says, the police officers, we enforce the law, but moral clarity shows the law is used to cage black lives. Here is where Shahid Bolson touches black history. Honesty alone does not save. Only honesty joined with moral clarity can produce justice, right? And this man is very right. You saying you did something wrong does not exclude you from punishment. You did something wrong, and you did it wrong knowing that it was morally incorrect or morally wrong, but still continue to do the wrong. So Trumpism as the politics of dishonest honesty. I told you that Trump is trying to give a new meaning to how we understand honesty, right? Trumpism is a total lie that is dressed in the dress or on the court of truth. Trump's politics claim honesty but deny moral clarity. See, let us break this down. First of all, we have honesty in speech. Trump says things bluntly. He insults immigrants, mocks the disabled, and attacks blacks community. His supporters call him, or rather call this, refreshing honesty. Trump also does something with the lack of moral clarity. He puts his own, but his honesty, the honesty of Trump, right, serves racism. It serves division, and it serves American greed or his greed. It is not guided by universal understanding of right and wrong. It is guided by authoritarian power. The third one is the effect on black Americans. This kind of dishonest honesty increases racism, police brutality, and economic inequality. Black communities become scapegoats for America's decline. Trumpism is a master class in deconstruction. It shows how words can look like honesty, but hide deep in dishonesty. It reveals how language in itself can become a weapon against truth. Because there's one thing which people might have to understand. Every communication we make is a subject to various interpretation. I say something can be interpreted in so many ways, right? And that's why it's important to have contextualization. Contextualization removes the ambiguity of words and language. The fifth part is the mechanics of moral confusion. Shahid Bolsen's warning is not only about politics, it is about human beings. People confuse honesty with moral clarity because they want comfort, not truth. They want leaders who speak simply, not wisely. They confuse bluntness with righteousness. In Trumpism, this confusion is very much visible. A white worker, angry at losing his job, believes Trump's honest words about immigrants still working. Oh, the immigrants are the one causing us to lose our jobs. They should go away, right? Trumpism is trying to overcome his cognitive dissonance by preaching the message of dishonesty and Trumpism. And his followers believe that what Trump is saying is truth. You see? But moral clarity shows the truth. Corporations are the ones stealing or rather denying jobs, not immigrants are the ones stealing the citizens' jobs, right? This confusion hurts black Americans twice. First, by the honesty or rather the dishonesty of the system, and second, by the lies told to poor whites. Racism becomes the false honesty of Trumpism, while the true dishonesty of capitalism remains hidden. For black Americans, dishonesty with moral clarity has always been survival, right? For black Americans, I repeat, honesty with moral clarity has always been survival. Think of these figures. Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was exposing the lies of freedom during slavery. We have Martin Luther King Jr. He was speaking truth with moral clarity against segregation. We have Malcolm X. He declared that honesty without justice is hypocrisy. These leaders understood Bolsen's point before he said. These leaders understood Shahid Bolsen's words before he said it. Honesty must rest on moral clarity. Without clarity, honesty is another mask for oppression. Today, Black Lives Matter continue this tradition. They do not just honestly name police killings. They demand moral clarity that says black life is sacred. Yeah? Another thing to understand is how do we connect Trumpism and the words of Shahid Bolsen? You see, when we compare Trumpism and the words of Shahid Bolsen, the structure will have this kind of nature. Trumpism's honesty is word spoken without filter. Trumpism's morality is rooted in fear, racism, and greed, right? So Trumpism's, according to Trump, honesty is speaking without filter. You just speak because you have the right to speak, even if you are hurting someone with your speech. According to Trump, moral clarity is rooted in fear, it's rooted in racism, and it's rooted in greed. Then what is the result of this? The result is dishonesty and honesty that destroys the truth. Dishonest honesty or lies, right? That now destroys the truth. Because if you mix dirty water and clean water, the clean water becomes dirty. The dirty water does not become clean. So according to Bolsen's honesty, honesty should be rooted in clear moral ground. According to Bolsen, morality should be subjected, or rather should be rooted in justice, fairness, and universal good. What's the result? Transformative honesty that builds truth. This contrast between Shahid Bolsen and Trumpism shows us the mechanics of power. Dishonest honesty keeps black Americans oppressed. Honest morality, as Bolsen calls for, is the path to liberation, right? So after understanding all this, what is the path forward? What is the way forward for the black people? You see, if honesty starts with moral clarity, then black America must continue to challenge the dishonest honesty of Trumpism and the wider American system. This means rejecting shallow honesty. Do not be fooled by the blunt talks of Donald Trump and those politicians, right? Don't be fooled by their blunt talk about justice. Black Americans demanding moral clarity. Always ask, whose morals, whose benefits? The third thing is building alternative narratives. Black Americans should create stories rooted in truth and justice, not propaganda. You see, this is not philosophy, it is survival. When a black mother loses her son to police violence, the officer may honestly say, I feared for my life. But moral clarity shows the truth. Systemic racism killed him. So moral clarity is a better, honest object. The one who tells the truth is the moral clarity, not the honesty. Because honesty can be subjective, but the truth about moral clarity can never, ever be subjective. Always objective. You can't change objectiveness. It's beyond us. So going back to the Persian proverb, doubt is the key to knowledge. Shahid Bolsen adds, honesty starts with moral clarity. When we put them together, we see the path. Doubt the false honesty of power, then rebuild honesty on clear grounds. For black Americans, the lesson is not abstract. It is life and death. Trumpism shows how dishonesty can wear the mask of honesty. Bolsen reminds us to pull off that mask, expose the contradiction, and demand clarity. In the end, honesty without clarity or moral clarity is dangerous, but honesty with moral clarity is the seed of justice. For blacks today, that seed must be watered, protected, and allowed to grow, so that the dishonest honesty of Trumpism does not choke the truth of black liberation or liberation of Americans in general. Yeah. Guys, this is EFK Original Documentaries. You like my work, kindly subscribe. Support me on Patreon. I'll really appreciate for your works. Thank you all for people who have been my members, people who have supported me. I really appreciate. Remember to subscribe, share this video, give it a like, of course, and see you in the next one. Sikia usingizi, damn.